There is a fruit that almost should not exist. Its skin is so thin that it bleeds the moment you touch it. It opens its flowers in the middle of winter while every other tree around it is still sleeping. And it survives temperatures so brutal that mercury freezes solid before the plant even begins to suffer. For most of the 20th century, the best genetics of this plant were locked away behind the Iron Curtain, studied in quiet horticultural stations across Siberia as part of a long Soviet effort to find food that could keep a population alive through endless winters. While American growers were busy breeding apples to look pretty under supermarket lights, Russian scientists were breeding a berry that behaves almost like a biological heater inside the human body. It looks like a blueberry that someone stretched in a mirror. It tastes like a raspberry left to soak in red wine. And it contains compounds that make most of the so-called superfoods in your local store look like flavored sugar water. The strange thing is that you have probably never seen it on a shelf. You have probably never tasted it. And there is a reason for that. A reason that has nothing to do with quality and everything to do with how modern food systems decide what is allowed to reach your kitchen. This plant is the honeyberry, known to botanists as Lonicera caerulea, and it is one of the most quietly extraordinary fruits I have ever grown. Before I tell you how to grow it, how to use it, and why it has been kept out of view for so long, let me show you what is actually happening inside this berry. Because once you see that, everything else starts to make sense. The honeyberry belongs to the honeysuckle family. That sentence alone makes some people nervous, and rightly so. Most plants in that family produce berries that are toxic to humans. But the honeyberry is the exception, the blue-fruited anomaly that evolved in the boreal forests of the far north, where the climate punishes anything that is not built to endure. While a peach or cherry blossom collapses the moment temperatures fall below 28 degrees Fahrenheit, the open flowers of a honeyberry can survive 19 degrees without showing damage. The wood of the plant itself can endure temperatures close to -53 Fahrenheit. It is built like a tank, and yet it produces something that tastes like dessert. The real surprise, though, is what is inside the fruit. For years, the blueberry has been marketed as the king of antioxidants. That story has a problem. If you cut open a commercial blueberry, you find blue skin on the outside and a pale green or whitish flesh inside. The medicinal value is concentrated in a very thin outer layer. Now cut open a honeyberry. The flesh is deep violet, almost crimson, saturated all the way through. There is no pale center, no diluted middle. The whole fruit is dense with color, and that color is the visible signal of a compound called cyanidin 3-glucoside, often abbreviated as C3G. C3G is one of the most active anthocyanins ever studied in human nutrition. In laboratory analysis, it has been measured at several times the antioxidant potency of the standard tocopherol forms of vitamin E. And it does not simply sweep up free radicals. It interacts with inflammatory pathways at the cellular level, which is why researchers in Canada, Japan, and Eastern Europe have spent so many years quietly examining it. The numbers are worth pausing on. According to analyses carried out at the University of Saskatchewan and at Dalhousie University, a standard blueberry contains roughly 160 to 200 milligrams of anthocyanins per 100 grams of fruit. The honeyberry, depending on the cultivar, lands somewhere between 400 and 1,500 milligrams per 100 grams. In the most pigmented varieties, that is more than 7 times the antioxidant density of a blueberry. Now consider vitamin C. An orange offers about 53 milligrams per 100 grams. The honeyberry can reach 186 milligrams per 100 grams. That means a small handful, no more than half a cup, can provide more vitamin C than 3 oranges, without the heavy fructose load that comes with citrus. And all of this is produced by a plant that needs almost nothing from you. No chemical fertilizers, no sprays, no pampering, no expensive soil amendments. It just grows. The honeyberry is not a recent invention. It is new to most of the Western world, but it has been part of human life in the far north for a very long time. On the island of Hokkaido in northern Japan, the indigenous Ainu people have treated this plant with reverence for centuries. They call it haskap, a word that loosely translates as the berry of long life and many presents. To them, It was not just food. It was something closer to a sacred fruit, a quiet source of vitality in a landscape that does not forgive weakness. While the Ainu valued it spiritually, the Soviet Union valued it strategically. During much of the 20th century, Soviet agronomists were focused on food security in regions where citrus would die in a single night. They needed a source of vitamin C that could grow in Siberia, in Kamchatka, in places where the soil freezes and the sky stays gray for months. So botanists went out into the wild, gathered the toughest plants of Lonicera caerulea, and began breeding them in research stations spread across the country. For decades, this work was done quietly inside a closed system. The genetics rarely left those borders. It was only after the fall of the Soviet Union that the seeds and cuttings began to move westward. In the late 1990s, a Canadian breeder named Dr. Bob Boers at the University of Saskatchewan started crossing the cold, vigorous Russian lines with the sweeter, more refined Japanese varieties. What came out of that work is what we now call the modern honeyberry, a fruit that combines the toughness of a Siberian shrub with the flavor of a Japanese delicacy. To understand why this plant has stayed in the shadows, it helps to compare it with the fruit that took its place in the market. The blueberry has dominated the supermarket aisle for one main reason, and it is not flavor and it is not nutrition. It is logistics. The blueberry has a thick, waxy skin that allows it to be machine harvested, tumbled into bins, shipped across continents, and still arrive looking decent. The honeyberry is the opposite. Its skin is so thin that it feels almost like a ripe raspberry, only more delicate. If you stack honeyberries in a deep crate and load that crate onto a truck, the weight of the upper berries will crush the lower ones long before the truck reaches its destination. What arrives at the warehouse is not fruit. It is juice mixed with skin. There is also the way the fruit detaches from the stem. When you pick a blueberry, the wound heals quickly and the fruit stays intact. When you pick a honeyberry, the top often stays slightly open and juice can leak from that point. That tiny detail is enough to make a fruit commercially unviable in a system built around long supply chains, shelf displays, and zero tolerance for stained packaging. A fruit with a shelf life of 3 days and a tendency to bleed through any container is simply not something a large distributor wants to handle, no matter how nutritious it is. And so the honeyberry was quietly set aside, not because it failed as food, but because it refused to behave like a product. That commercial failure is exactly why this plant matters so much for the home grower. Because industry cannot move it efficiently, the only realistic way to enjoy honeyberries is to grow your own. And the good news is that this is probably one of the easiest fruiting shrubs you will ever plant. Before going further, a quick word about safety. Do not go out into the woods and start eating random honeysuckles. Most wild species in that family produce red or orange berries that are toxic to humans. The edible species you want is Lonicera caerulea, and in some cases Lonicera villosa. Unless you are deeply experienced with foraging, do not try to identify these on your own in the wild. The safest path, and frankly the more productive one, is to buy certified plants from a reputable nursery so you know exactly what you are growing. The honeyberry is a creature of the north. It performs best in climates that line up roughly with USDA zones 2 through 7. It can be pushed into zone 8 if you give it afternoon shade and consistent moisture, but it does not enjoy the harsh, dry heat of the deep south. It is a plant that wants real winter. To set fruit properly, it needs roughly 1,000 to 1,200 chill hours between 32 and 45 degrees Fahrenheit. In winter, it drops all of its leaves and looks like a bundle of lifeless sticks. People often panic at that stage and assume the plant has died. It has not. That deep dormancy is exactly what allows it to wake up in early spring and ignore the late frosts that destroy peaches, cherries, and apricots in many regions. One important point about getting started: do not buy seeds. Honeyberries do not come true from seed, which means that if you plant a packet, you will get a wild, often bitter bush that may take 4 or 5 years to produce, and the fruit will rarely match what the parent plant offered. You want dormant nursery plants, or rooted plugs from a serious supplier. Look for cultivars that have been developed and tested. Names like Aurora, Borealis, Indigo Gem, Honeybee, and the larger fruited types, sometimes sold under the Yesberry label. Specialist nurseries like Honeyberry USA and One Green World carry the strong University of Saskatchewan lines. Some larger sellers like Stark Brothers and Proven Winners also stock reliable varieties for home growers. The next rule is essential and easy to miss. Honeyberries are not self-fertile. You must plant at least 2 different cultivars that bloom at the same time so that they can cross-pollinate. If you bring home Aurora, pair it with Borealis or with Indigo Gem. If you buy one of the Yesberry types, plant it with its recommended partner. A single bush on its own will give you flowers, but very little fruit. 2 compatible varieties give you full clusters. Planting itself is straightforward. Choose a site with full sun in the north or some afternoon shade in warmer regions. The plant tolerates a wide range of soils, from heavy clay to sandy loam, and accepts a pH range from around 5 to 8. That alone makes it far easier than a blueberry, which demands acidic, peaty conditions and tends to starve in ordinary garden soil. Dig a hole twice the width of the root ball. Set the plant at the same depth it was in the pot. Water it in well, and mulch generously to keep the roots cool and the soil moist. After that, you do almost nothing. Deer tend to leave it alone because the leaves are slightly fuzzy. Most insects are not interested in it. And because the fruit ripens in late May or early June, before many garden pests are even active, you rarely have to fight anything for the harvest. A healthy honeyberry shrub can live for 50 years or more in the same spot. It can reach 4 to 6 feet tall, producing year after year with very little intervention. In its prime, a mature bush can deliver several pounds of fruit, and a small row of 4 to 6 plants is enough to keep a family in fresh berries, jams, and frozen stock through the rest of the year. The flavor is worth describing carefully because it is unlike anything most people have tasted before. Think of a fruit that sits somewhere between a ripe blueberry, a slightly tart raspberry, and a black currant, with a faint note of wine in the background. The better cultivars reach Brix levels, which measure sugar content, of 15 to 18. A typical strawberry sits around 10, so these berries are noticeably sweeter once they are fully ripe. The key word is fully. A honeyberry that looks blue on the outside may still be green and sour inside. The trick is to wait until the fruit turns deep purple all the way through. If you cut one open and the flesh is still pale, give it another week. Once the inside matches the outside, the flavor jumps from sharp to rich, almost jammy. You can eat them straight from the bush, fold them into yogurt, freeze them whole, cook them into compotes, or press them for juice that tastes deeper and more complex than anything you can buy. Because the fruit is so high in pigment, even a small handful colors a bowl of porridge or a glass of water like ink. When you put all of this together, you start to see what kind of plant we are talking about. A shrub that survives temperatures most fruits cannot. A bush that ignores poor soil. A perennial that lives for half a century with minimal care. A berry that carries more antioxidants than blueberries and more vitamin C than oranges, all in one bite. And a fruit that the commercial system has quietly decided is too fragile, too leaky, and too inconvenient to bother selling to you. That last part is the real story. The honeyberry did not stay obscure because it failed. It stayed obscure because it does not fit the model of long-distance shipping and supermarket display. For a home grower, that disadvantage flips completely. You do not need a fruit that can survive 1,000 miles in a refrigerated truck. You need a fruit that grows easily in your soil, produces year after year, and gives your family something genuinely valuable. By that measure, the honeyberry is almost unbeatable. If you have space for 2 small shrubs and a willingness to wait 1 season for the first real harvest, this is one of the most rewarding plants you can put into the ground. Plant them once, choose compatible varieties, mulch them well, and let them do what they have been doing in the boreal forests for thousands of years. In return, you get a fruit that the industry never figured out how to package. The kind of food that used to be normal in places where people had to grow what they needed. And the quiet satisfaction of stepping into your own garden in early summer to fill a bowl with something almost nobody else on your street has ever tasted. If you enjoy uncovering the plants that modern food systems have left behind and learning how to bring them back into ordinary gardens, subscribe to the channel and join us in the next videos.